The security lights along the campus perimeter hummed like tired insects, washing the empty road in pale white. Marcus Hale walked with his jacket unzipped, laptop bag slung low on one shoulder, mind still stuck on an unfinished deployment that had failed 15 minutes before midnight. His phone vibrated again, another engineer asking for permission to push a hotfix. He didn't answer yet. A cruiser rolled up behind him without sirens. The light snapped on anyway. Blue, red, blue, red. Marcus stopped. Slowly, he raised his hand without being told, the way muscle memory teaches you long before adulthood. The cold night air bit through his shirt as a door slammed shut behind him. "Where you coming from?" the officer asked, voice flat, already bored. Marcus turned just enough to show his badge. "Work." "Aye." "Work." The officer laughed softly. "This late?" "On this side of town." The flashlight beam cut across Marcus's chest, lingered on the hoodie, the laptop bag, the worn sneakers. It paused at his face like it was looking for permission to doubt him. "I own the—" Marcus started. The officer stepped closer. Too close. "You don't get smart with me. Hands where I can see them." People watched from parked cars, from behind glass. No one spoke. Marcus felt something old and heavy settle behind his ribs. Not fear exactly, but the certainty of being reduced to a silhouette someone else had already judged. Then the officer said it. Quiet. Sharp. "Men like you don't belong here after dark." The words landed harder than the cold. Behind them, the massive glass buildings of the tech campus glowed silently, millions of dollars of servers, code, and power humming beneath their feet. Marcus's phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't an engineer. It was a board. Marcus Hale left the glass doors of Building C at 12:17 a.m., the air outside cooler than he expected, sharp enough to wake the ache out of his shoulders. The campus was quiet in that way only tech corridors ever got at night, too clean, too bright, pretending nothing human had ever broken down there. He adjusted the strap of his laptop bag and glanced back once, instinctively, at the rows of lit windows. Somewhere inside, servers hummed through the fix he'd just approved. Somewhere inside, people waited for his confirmation that the platform would hold until morning. His phone buzzed in his palm. "Marcus, we're stable," Lena said without preamble. "Latency's down. No fires." "Good," he replied. "Document everything. We'll review at 9. "You okay to walk?" she asked. It wasn't about distance. "I'm fine," Marcus said. "I'll call if anything breaks." He ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket, hoodie rustling softly as he crossed the security gate. The badge clipped at his waist reflected the floodlights for a moment before disappearing into shadow. He didn't bother locking his car yet. The walk helped him think. A low engine sound rose behind him. He didn't turn right away. He never did. The cruiser slowed, tires crunching lightly against gravel, then stopped. Blue light spilled across the pavement, followed by red. The pattern painted his hands before his brain caught up. Marcus stopped walking. The door opened, closed. Footsteps approached with deliberate pace. "Sir," a voice called out. "Hold up." Marcus raised his hand slowly, fingers spread, heart steady but alert. He turned just enough to show his face. "Yes," he said. "What are you doing out here this late?" the officer asked. Marcus glanced past him at the glowing buildings. "Leaving work." The officer's flashlight flicked on. It traced Marcus's hoodie, the laptop bag, the scuffed shoes. It lingered at his face. "You work here?" the officer asked. "Yes," Marcus said. He reached carefully for his badge. "Aye." "Don't move," the officer snapped. Marcus froze. The badge dangled uselessly from his fingers. The officer stepped closer, boots stopping just inside Marcus's personal space. Close enough that Marcus could smell coffee on his breath. "You got ID?" the officer asked. "It's on my badge," Marcus said calmly. "I'm the—" "The what?" the officer cut in. Marcus hesitated. He'd learned long ago that naming power too early could sound like provocation. "I'm employed here," he said instead. The officer's mouth twitched. "Funny, this place locks down at 10. "We had an outage," Marcus replied. "Critical systems." The flashlight tilted, sharp and accusatory. You expect me to believe that? Marcus met his gaze. It's true. Silence stretched. The cruiser lights pulsed like a slow heartbeat. Hands on the hood, the officer said. Marcus swallowed, then complied, palms flattening against cold metal. He focused on his breathing, on the hum of electricity in the distance, on not letting the moment become something worse. Any weapons? The officer asked. No. Any reason you're nervous? Marcus almost laughed. He didn't. I'm not, he said. The officer patted him down anyway, movements efficient, impersonal. When it was over, he stepped back, clearly dissatisfied. Men like you don't belong here after dark, the officer said quietly. Marcus closed his eyes for half a second. I belong exactly where I am, he said. The officer scoffed. We'll see. Marcus's phone vibrated again in his pocket. The officer noticed. Don't reach, he warned. It's my phone, Marcus said. Work. The officer stared at him, then nodded once. Answer it. Speaker. Marcus pulled the phone out slowly. Marcus, a new voice said. Tight. Urgent. The board needs you. Now. Marcus looked past the officer, past the cruiser, back at the glowing campus. I'm a little tied up, he said. The officer frowned. Marcus met his eyes. That campus. Marcus said softly, It's mine. The officer laughed, and somewhere deep inside Marcus, something shifted, waiting for morning. Marcus sat on a hard plastic bench with his hand folded, posture straight out of habit, eyes fixed on the scuffed linoleum floor. The station smelled like disinfectant and old coffee, a scent that clung to memory. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang and rang until someone picked it up, voice low, annoyed. You can relax, the officer said, dropping into the chair across from him. This is just routine. Marcus didn't respond. The officer flipped open a thin folder, though Marcus had watched him pull the papers out of a blank drawer. Name. You already have it, Marcus said. The officer's pen paused. Say it anyway. Marcus Hale. The pen scratched. Too slowly. You understand why we stopped you, the officer continued. Late night. Private property. Recent break-ins. On a campus I own, Marcus said evenly. The officer didn't look up. You keep saying that. Because it's true. A second officer lingered near the doorway, arms crossed, pretending not to listen. Marcus could feel the room leaning in on him, waiting for a misstep. You got proof? The seated officer asked. Yes. Where? In your system, Marcus replied. In city records. In about 12 different databases. The officer smirked. That's so. Yes. Silence stretched again, thick and deliberate. Marcus's mind drifted despite himself. To his mother, who'd taught him how to speak slowly to authority figures. To his first investor meeting, when he'd worn a suit 2 sizes too big, and been told he was articulate. To the moment he'd signed the final papers on the campus, hand steady, smile small, knowing the building would never recognize him back. You know, the officer said, leaning back, most people in your position get defensive. I am defensive, Marcus said. I'm just controlled. The officer snorted. Same thing. A knock sounded at the open door. A woman in a press blazer stepped in, eyes sharp, tablet tucked under her arm. Sergeant Mills, she said, I need a word. The officer stood, irritation flashing across his face. In a minute. Now, she replied. He hesitated, then stepped outside, pulling the door almost closed behind him. Marcus heard fragments through the gap. Badge scan came back. Address is registered. Do you know who? The door shut fully. Marcus exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. His phone buzzed again, muted but insistent. He didn't look at it. He already knew what it would say. He was late. Not to work. To the version of himself that believed silence was protection. The officer returned, jaw tight. You want water? He asked abruptly. No. You sure? Yes. The officer sat again, less casual now. So, he said, tapping the folder, turns out your name is associated with some properties. Marcus waited. High-value ones. Yes. The officer cleared his throat. Still doesn't mean you weren't trespassing. Marcus leaned forward slightly. You stopped me on a public road. The officer's eyes flickered. And you said it yourself, Marcus continued. Reasonable suspicion. The officer bristled. What's your tone? I am, Marcus said. Another pause. This one shorter, less confident. Look, the officer said, voice shifting, smoothing out. We get calls. We respond. Things get misunderstood. By whom? Marcus asked. The officer didn't answer. The woman in the blazer returned, this time with a man in a wrinkled suit behind her. He glanced at Marcus, did a double take, then smiled too quickly. Mr. Hale, he said, I'm deputy counsel for the city. There's been a mix-up. Marcus studied his face. The relief there wasn't for Marcus. It was for the room. I'd like to go home, Marcus said. Of course, the man replied. We'll have you out shortly. The officer stood, suddenly attentive. No charges, he said, just clearing things up. Marcus rose as well. You stopped me, he said quietly. You searched me. You detained me. The officer shrugged. Within policy. Marcus nodded once. He'd expected that answer. As they walked toward the exit, Marcus caught his reflection in the darkened glass. He looked composed, professional, untouched. He knew better. Outside, the night air felt different now. He pulled his jacket tighter, phone finally in his hand. The first message was from the board. The second was from security. The third was from an unknown number. It read, We saw what happened. We're not surprised. Marcus closed his eyes. This wasn't over. By 8:45 the next morning, the campus no longer felt like Marcus Hale's creation. It felt like a question mark. The executive floor buzzed with low voices and half-formed explanations. Screens flickered with internal dashboards no one was really looking at. Marcus stood at the head of the long conference table, coffee untouched, listening as people talked around the truth instead of at it. He didn't answer his phone, someone said. Security flagged the badge exit at 12:17, another added. Then nothing. Lena finally spoke. He always answers. Marcus watched them from just outside the circle of concern, his own body present but his mind still stuck in the station. Fluorescent lights, clipped voices, the way the officer had said men like you as if reading from a script older than any of them. The doors opened. Every head turned. Marcus stepped in. For a split second, no one moved. Then chairs scraped, voices overlapped. Marcus, are you okay? Where were you? He raised a hand. The room fell silent. I'm fine, he said. The words sounded rehearsed even to him. But something happened last night. They waited. A patrol officer stopped me outside the west gate, Marcus continued. Detained me, brought me in. A sharp intake of breath cut through the room. For what? The COO asked. Marcus met his eyes. Existing. No one laughed. Security pulled up footage on the main screen. Grainy but unmistakable. Marcus recognized the angle immediately. The camera mounted above the gate. The slow roll of the cruiser. The lights igniting the dark. The room leaned forward as one. That's not a stop, Lena said quietly. That's a hunt. Marcus didn't respond. An engineer in the back raised her hand like she was in school. With respect, she said, voice shaking slightly. This isn't new. All eyes turned to her. I've been pulled over 3 times leaving this campus, she continued. Badge visible. Laptop in hand. Every time they ask if I belong here. A murmur rippled across the room. Another voice joined in. Me too. Same. I stopped driving at night because of it. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. Not surprise. Recognition. Security cleared his throat. We've logged complaints before. Individually. Individually, Marcus repeated. A knock interrupted them. The head of communications slipped in, tablet pressed to her chest like a shield. We have a problem, she said. She didn't need to explain. A local blog had already posted. Black tech worker detained outside campus after midnight. The photo wasn't clear, but the caption was. Marcus read it twice. "That's not my name," he said. "It will be," she replied, "by noon." The COO rubbed his temples. "We can shut this down. Quietly." Marcus looked at him. "How?" Statement. Cooperation. Emphasize misunderstanding. Whose misunderstanding? Marcus asked. The COO hesitated. Across the city, the precinct buzzed too. Phones rang with unfamiliar urgency. The officer from the night before sat stiff-backed in a briefing room, jaw clenched as the supervisor paced. "Your body cam?" the supervisor asked. "Active," the officer replied. "And your report?" "By the book." The supervisor stopped pacing. "You know who he is." The officer scoffed. "Doesn't matter." "It does now." Back on campus, Marcus stepped outside alone, phone pressed to his ear. "This isn't just about me," he said to the voice on the other end. "I know," said the board chair. "That's why you have to be careful." Marcus watched employees stream in through the gates, badges flashing, eyes alert, bodies tense in a way that had nothing to do with deadlines. "Careful hasn't protected them," Marcus said. Silence answered him. Across town, a text thread lit up among employees who rarely spoke. Screens filled with stories, locations, times. The same phrases repeated like echoes. "Where are you coming from?" "You don't fit the description." "Just doing my job." By noon, a reporter stood outside the West Gate, microphone poised. The glass buildings reflected her back at herself, multiplied. Inside, Marcus watched the live feed on mute. "They're asking for comment," communication said. Marcus nodded. "Give it." She blinked. "All of it." "Yes." The officer watched the same feed from the precinct break room, coffee cooling in his hand. When Marcus's name appeared on the screen, not worker, not suspect, but owner, the room went quiet. Someone let out a low whistle. The officer didn't move. On campus, Marcus stood at the gate again as cameras rolled. "This place was built to innovate," he said calmly, "not to intimidate." Behind him, the lights hummed on in broad daylight. For the first time, the campus wasn't silent, and neither was the city. By mid-afternoon, the language shifted. At City Hall, it was no longer an incident. It was a misunderstanding, a word light enough to float above facts, soft enough to land without bruising anyone important. Marcus heard it repeated on the news, by spokespeople with careful voices and practiced concern. "We're reviewing the situation," the police chief said at a podium. All procedures were followed. Marcus watched from his office, the sound muted. He recognized the posture, hands folded just so, eyes steady, the look of someone who believed time would do the work for him. Behind him, Lena stood with her arms crossed. "They are closing ranks." "Yes," Marcus said. "That's what systems do." The officer sat across from internal affairs, jaw set, fingers interlaced. The room was smaller than he expected, the walls bare. A recorder blinked red on the table. "Walk us through your decision-making," the investigator said. The officer spoke confidently. "Late hour, high-value area, suspicious behavior." He used the phrase reasonable suspicion twice, like a talisman. "Did Mr. Hale threaten you?" the investigator asked. "No." "Did he resist?" "No." "Then why detain him?" The officer hesitated, just long enough to notice. "He fit a profile," he said. The investigator's pen stopped moving. Across town, Marcus's legal counsel laid out options with measured calm. "We can push for accountability quietly," she said, "or this can become public." "It already is," Marcus replied. "Yes," she said, "but not fully." Marcus thought of the engineer who'd spoken up, of the messages still arriving on his phone, each one another confirmation that the stop wasn't an exception. It was a pattern waiting for a name big enough to interrupt it. "What happens if we stay quiet?" Marcus asked. The lawyer didn't answer right away. "Then the officer keeps his job. The policy remains intact. The next person learns to keep their head down." Marcus nodded. He'd expected that. At the precinct, the officer scrolled through his phone during a break, irritation tightening his mouth. Headlines were changing. The word owner appeared more frequently now. So did lawsuit, A younger cop leaned over. "Man," he said, "you picked the wrong one." The officer bristled. "I did my job." "Sure," the younger cop replied, "but this one's got cameras." That night, Marcus attended a hastily arranged town hall on campus. Employees filled the auditorium, sitting shoulder to shoulder, voices low but electric. Some held badges in their laps like proof of belonging. Marcus stood on stage without notes. "I want to be clear," he said. "This isn't about embarrassment or revenge." Someone laughed bitterly. "It's about safety," Marcus continued, "and dignity, and what happens when power decides who deserves both." A hand shot up. "What if they retaliate?" a woman asked. Marcus didn't lie. "They might." Silence followed. Heavy, honest. "But silence has already cost us," he said. The officer watched a clip of the town hall later that night, jaw tightening as Marcus spoke with the ease of someone used to command. The narrative was slipping from his hands. He'd expected gratitude for restraint, not scrutiny for bias. At home, Marcus finally sat alone, lights low, shoes still on. The adrenaline faded, leaving exhaustion in its place. He replayed the stop in fragments, the flashlight, the words, the way compliance had felt like erasure. His phone buzzed again. A message from his mother. "I'm proud of you, but I'm worried." Marcus stayed at it for a long time. Outside, a patrol car rolled past his building. He watched it disappear down the street. Lights off, presence still felt. This was the cost of speaking, of refusing to shrink. Tomorrow, the footage would be released. And nothing, no statement, no careful phrasing, would be able to contain what it showed. The footage dropped at 9:02 a.m. Not leaked, released. Marcus sat at his desk with the blinds half open, sunlight cutting across the wood grain like a dividing line. His legal team had asked him not to watch it alone. He did anyway. The body cam opened with static and motion, the rhythm of walking, the dull echo of boots on pavement. Then the lights. Blue. Red. The same pulse that had burned into Marcus's memory the night before. "Sir, hold up." Marcus watched himself stop, watched his shoulders square, his hands rise, watched the pause, longer than it needed to be, before the officer spoke again. "What are you doing out here this late?" Marcus didn't flinch this time. He let the footage play. The flashlight lingered exactly where he remembered it lingering. The hoodie, the bag, the shoes, the silence between words stretched, loaded, intentional. Men like you don't belong here after dark. The room felt smaller. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again as the footage continued. The search, the tone, the way his calm was met with suspicion instead of relief. The moment he said it. "That campus? It's mine." The officer's laugh echoed in the room. Short, dismissive. The video ended. Marcus leaned back, chest tight, not from shock but from the strange clarity of seeing something private become evidence. Trauma flattened into pixels. Pain rendered undeniable. Across the city, screens lit up. News anchors replayed the clip in slow motion, freezing on the officer's face, on Marcus's stillness. Legal analysts paused the audio, unpacking phrasing, tone, precedent. By noon, the headline had changed everywhere. Black tech founder detained outside his own campus. The officer sat in the precinct briefing room, arms crossed, watching the same clip on mute. He'd seen it before, of course, but not like this. Not framed. Not narrated. A supervisor cleared his throat. "You recognize the issue." The officer stayed at the screen. He didn't say who he was. "He didn't have to," the supervisor replied. "That shouldn't matter," the officer said. "Law's a law." The supervisor's voice dropped. "It always matters. You just didn't think it would." Outside the precinct, protesters gathered, not shouting at first, just standing, holding signs with word pulled directly from the footage. "Men like you. After dark. Reasonable to whom?" On campus, Marcus walked through the atrium as employees stopped pretending not to stare. Some nodded. Some looked away. Some watched him like he'd become a mirror they weren't sure they wanted. A reporter intercepted him near the elevators. "Mr. Hale," she said, "why speak now?" Marcus didn't slow. Because silence only protects the person who's already comfortable. "Do you want the officer fired?" she asked. Marcus stopped then, turned. "I want the system that made him comfortable saying that to be exposed," he said. "What happens to him is a consequence, not the point." By evening, city records surfaced, property deeds, zoning approvals, tax filings. The campus wasn't just associated with Marcus Hale. It was his. The revelation didn't make the stop worse. It made it undeniable. The officer went home early that day, sat on his couch, TV on, volume low. His name scrolled along the bottom of the screen now, paired with words like bias and investigation. He told himself he'd done nothing wrong. He told himself this was about politics, about pressure, about optics. But when the clip replayed again, and he heard his own voice, flat, certain, cruel in its ease, something shifted. Not regret. Fear. At home, Marcus finally slept. Not well, but deeply enough to dream of walking the campus at night without lights, without questions. When he woke, his phone was filled with messages from people he didn't know. "This happened to me too. Thank you for saying something." They never believed us. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, phone warm in his hands. The name on the deed had cracked something open. And now, nothing that followed would stay contained. The second release hit harder than the first. By then, the public had already chosen sides. The bodycam footage had framed the moment. The headlines had named it. But this was a part no one could explain away with policy language or procedural fog. The unedited cut. Marcus sat in the small screening room his legal team had insisted on. Lights dimmed. 3 people behind him he barely registered. The footage began earlier this time, before the lights, before the voice. The officer in the cruiser, idling, watching. "Lots empty," the officer muttered to himself. "Too empty." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. The camera showed the slow roll forward. The way the officer had angled the cruiser, not to block traffic, but to trap a pedestrian. The deliberate choice of lights over siren. His walking away from the buildings, the officer said into his radio. "Suspicious." No dispatcher questioned it. The stop unfolded again, but now the context sharpened every moment. The pause before the command. The way the officer's hand hovered near his belt when Marcus reached for his badge. The decision points, each one a choice, not a reflex. "Don't get smart with me." The room went quiet behind Marcus. When the footage reached the search, Marcus noticed something new. The officer's breathing quickened, not afraid, excited, alert in the way someone gets when they believe they found what they were looking for. Then came the line, "Men like you don't belong here after dark." This time, the officer didn't sound casual. He sounded sure. The footage cut to the station intake, audio only. The officer joked with another cop off camera. "Guy thinks he owns a place," he said, laughing. The laugh stuck in Marcus's throat like a shard. The video ended. No one spoke. Outside the screening room, the city erupted. Cable news ran the clip without commentary, letting silence do the work. Law professors paused frames, pointing out moments where discretion had tipped into prejudice. Former officers spoke carefully, using phrases like implicit bias and escalation pathways. Protesters returned to the precinct in daylight this time. Louder, angrier. Names appeared on signs now, not just Marcus's, but others. People who'd filed complaints. People who hadn't bothered. Inside the precinct, the mood shifted from defensive to brittle. The officer was placed on administrative leave before noon. He sat in his car in the parking lot, uniform still on, phone buzzing unanswered in his lap. His body cam footage played on his screen again, this time shared by someone he barely knew. Comments scrolled past faster than he could read. "Fire him. This is why we don't feel safe." He said it like it was normal. He slammed the phone face down. "They are twisting it," he muttered to the empty car. Anyone would have done the same. But the words felt thin. At the campus, Marcus addressed employees again, this time via live stream. He didn't stand. He sat, hands visible, voice steady but stripped of Polish. "I watched the footage," he said. "All of it." The comment section froze. "There are moments in that video where I disappear," Marcus continued, "where I'm no longer a person, just a problem to be solved." He paused. Let it land. That's not about one officer, he said. That's about what we've trained ourselves to see. Messages poured in. Agreement. Anger. Fear. After the stream ended, Marcus stayed seated, staring at the darkened camera. His chest ached, not with rage, but with the delayed impact of holding it together for everyone else. Lena approached quietly. You don't have to carry all of this, she said. Marcus looked up at her. I know, he replied, but I can't put it down yet. That night, Marcus walked the campus again. Not alone this time. Security accompanied him, visible but distant. The lights fell harsher now, less neutral. He stopped at the west gate, stood exactly where the cruiser had stopped him. For a moment, he imagined a night without cameras, without footage, without his name on the deed. He wondered how many stories had ended right here. Then he turned and walked on. Behind him, the camera kept recording. And for once, it wasn't looking away. The first charge didn't come with sirens or headlines. It arrived as an email. Marcus read it twice, seated at the same desk where he'd signed off on million-dollar infrastructure decisions without blinking. Administrative suspension pending further review. Carefully worded. Bloodless. Designed to sound like balance. This isn't justice, Lena said when he forwarded it to her. It's insulation. Yes, Marcus replied, but insulation cracks under heat. The heat came fast. Within 48 hours, 3 more people stepped forward. One was a janitor who worked the night shift and had been stopped twice in the same month. One was a junior engineer who'd been cuffed and released with no paperwork. One was a delivery driver who'd never filed a complaint because he didn't think it would matter. Their stories overlapped like tracing paper. Same gate, same phrasing, same report language copied and pasted with small changes. The district attorney's office called Marcus in for a formal statement. The room was larger than the station interview room, but it carried the same weight. Authority dresses neutrality. We're looking at a pattern, the DA said, not just conduct. Marcus nodded. Patterns don't happen by accident. The DA studied him. You understand this will escalate? Yes, Marcus said. It already has. Outside, the officer sat across from a union representative, hands clenched so tightly his knuckles ached. They're making an example out of you, the rep said. This isn't about policy anymore. It's politics. I followed procedure, the officer insisted. The rep sighed. Procedure doesn't protect tone or intent. When the formal charges were announced, misconduct, civil rights violations, falsified reporting, the city framed it as accountability. The union called it betrayal. Commentators argued over language while the facts stayed stubbornly still. Marcus watched the press conference from his office again. This time, he didn't mute it. We acknowledge harm, the mayor said, and we are committed to reform. Marcus leaned back, eyes closing briefly. Acknowledging harm was not the same as repairing it, but it was further than silence. The officer was arrested quietly 2 days later. No cameras, no lights, just paperwork and consequence. He sat in a holding room, uniform gone, replaced with neutral fabric that erased rank. For the first time, no one called him sir. You understand the charges, the detective said. The officer nodded, throat tight. This is blown out of proportion. The detective met his eyes. That's what everyone says when the scale tips. At home that night, Marcus finally let himself feel it. The anger came first, hot, sharp, overdue. Then grief, for the person he'd been before the stop, for the ease he'd mistaken for safety, for the knowledge that accountability had required proof he shouldn't have needed. His mother called late. They are saying you won, she said carefully. Marcus stared out the window at the city lights. No, he replied. I survived. On campus, policies were rewritten, training scheduled, committees formed, all necessary, none sufficient. Employees stopped Marcus in hallways now, not to ask permission, but to thank him. He accepted it with a nod, with humility, with a quiet understanding that visibility carried responsibility whether he wanted it or not. The officer watched his own arraignment on a delay, face blurred on screen. He barely recognized himself without the uniform. For the first time, he wondered, not whether he'd been right, but how many times he'd been comfortable being wrong. The case moved forward, and for once, the system didn't look away. Testifying didn't feel like courage. It felt like exposure. Marcus sat in the witness chair under lights that flattened everything. His voice, his posture, the long road that had brought him here. The courtroom was full but quiet, the kind of silence that pressed inward. Every cough sounded amplified. Every movement felt watched. "Please state your name for the record," the clerk said. "Marcus Hale," he replied. He spoke clearly. He always did. The prosecutor guided him gently at first. Timeline, location, facts. The night after midnight unfolded again, this time through questions designed to sound neutral while circling pain like a blade. "How did the officer address you?" Marcus paused. "With suspicion." "Did you feel free to leave?" "No." "Why not?" Marcus looked toward the jury, then back at the prosecutor. "Because history teaches you what happens when you test authority in moments like that." A murmur rippled through the gallery. When the defense rose, the temperature shifted. "Mr. Hale," the attorney said smoothly, "you're a powerful man, correct?" "I have influence," Marcus said. "Yes." "And that night, you chose not to disclose your status immediately." "I shouldn't have needed to." The attorney smiled faintly. "But you could have avoided the entire situation." Marcus leaned forward. "By proving I deserve basic respect." Silence followed. The judge allowed it. Outside the courtroom, cameras waited. Inside, Marcus felt something deeper than fear: fatigue. The exhaustion of translating humanity into evidence. The officer testified later that day. He spoke of procedure, of stress, of judgment calls made in seconds. He avoided Marcus's eyes. When the verdict came weeks later, it was measured. Guilty on multiple counts. Termination upheld. Civil penalties assigned. No cheers. No cinematic release. Marcus sat through it all, hands folded, heart heavy. Justice, he realized, didn't feel like triumph. It felt like gravity, necessary, impersonal, and long overdue. That night, Marcus walked the campus alone again. No cameras, no security detail. Just quiet and the low hum of servers beneath his feet. He stopped where it had started. The gate looked smaller now. He breathed in deeply, then out. Being right had cost him sleep, ease, innocence. But silence would have cost everyone else more. Marcus turned and walked forward, carrying the weight, not as a burden, but as proof he was still standing. The campus looked different at night now. Not safer, not softer, just honest. Marcus walked the central path with his hands in his pockets, shoes clicking faintly against concrete polished by years of ambition. The building still glowed, glass and steel reflecting one another endlessly, but the illusion of neutrality was gone. He could feel it in the air, in the way silence no longer pretended to be empty. The officer's sentencing had concluded that morning. No cameras inside, no speeches outside. A quiet ending to a very loud truth. The official statement framed it as closure. Marcus didn't feel closed. He paused near the west gate again. Not out of ritual, but recognition. This was where the story had demanded to be told. Where power had assumed the wrong thing and doubled down on it. Where compliance had been mistaken for guilt. A security guard approached from a distance, then stopped himself, waiting. "Evening, Mr. Hale," he said carefully. Marcus nodded. "Evening." The guard hesitated. "You want me to walk you?" Marcus considered it, then shook his head. "I'm all right." The guard stepped back, respectful this time, not performative. Marcus stood alone. He thought about the messages that had slowed but never stopped, about the people who still walked home with keys threaded between their fingers, about the ones who never filed complaints because they'd learned too early what complaints cost. He also thought about the small shifts, the policy changes, the officers now trained with footage instead of hypotheticals, the employees who spoke up sooner, louder. Progress didn't announce itself. It accumulated. His phone buzzed once more. A message from Lena. "Servers stable. Team heading home. See you tomorrow." Marcus smiled faintly. Tomorrow still existed. That felt like something. He turned back toward the heart of the campus. Footsteps steady, posture unchanged. Ownership, he'd learned, wasn't about deeds or signatures. It was about responsibility, about refusing to let comfort become permission. Behind him, the light stayed on, not to interrogate, not to accuse, but to illuminate. And as Marcus walked forward, the city watched, not for spectacle this time, but for what came after. The night didn't ask him to prove he belonged. He belonged anyway. The badge scanner beeped softly as Marcus entered the west gate. No sirens, no lights, no questions. It was early evening now, the hour when the campus filled with overlapping conversations and unfinished thoughts. Employees crossed paths without flinching. Laughter drifted where silence used to sit. Marcus paused just inside the gate. The plaque had been installed quietly, without ceremony. No names, no dates, just a sentence etched into brushed steel. Dignity is not conditional. People pass it every day without stopping. That was the point. Inside the precinct, training footage played on loop in a classroom. Recruits watched the stop frame by frame, not to memorize policy, but to understand consequence. The instructor didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Outside the city, life continued unevenly, imperfectly. Stops still happened. Mistakes still occurred. But complaints were answered faster now. Cameras stayed on longer. Silence broke sooner. Progress didn't fix everything, but it interrupted momentum. Marcus reached his office and set his bag down, rolling his shoulders loose. Through the glass, the city stretched outward, messy, brilliant, unfinished. He thought briefly of the man who had stopped him, not with satisfaction, not with pity, just with the clarity of knowing that unchecked power always costs someone first. This time, it hadn't ended in silence. Marcus turned back to his screen as a message popped up. New build ready for review. He typed a single word. Approved. And the system moved forward.